Hello and welcome to the CNBC Africa Special Investigative Report. EOH has once again found itself on the wrong side of the fence when it comes to corporate governance and ethics. One of the companies it owns is accused of corruption, and shareholders have shown EOH no mercy, collapsing its share price to unprecedented lows. This has threatened its funding model for acquisitions, which up until now have mostly been done through issuing shares. This week, Asha Bobat, the man who founded EOH and transformed it into Africa's largest ICT company, announced his return. The news took some pressure off its share price, but will it be enough to restore the company's reputation? In the next half hour, we discuss the issues that have been raised at EOH. We get the perspective of investors of the company's prospects, and we find out whether Bobat is enough to steer EOH out of its troubles.
This is the man giving EOH and its shareholders a headache. His name is Keith Keating, and he is the director of 3 companies that are at the center of a state investigation into corruption, money laundering, and fraud. These companies, Forensic Data Analysis, Grid Control Technologies, and Investigative Software Solutions, have been part of the EOH group for more than 2 years. Reports that one of them, FDA, was raided by South Africa's independent police body, IPID, triggered panic amongst EOH investors and sent its share price into tailspin. The stock price lost more than half of its value on the JSE within 5 days. The collapse forced 2 EOH directors to dump millions of rands worth of shares in the market because the lenders that financed them deemed the deal too risky and wanted their money back. What made matters worse for EOH was the bombshell that was Steinhoff International. The furniture group has its own skeletons. It is being investigated for accounting fraud. Steinhoff's troubles wiped off more than 200 billion rand off its market value last week and brought the rest of the JSE down with it. This is not the first time EOH finds itself in a web of corrupt allegations. Earlier this year, media reports suggested that it was involved in a questionable contract with the state over social grants. There was no evidence that the contract with the South African Social Securities Agency was out of order, and EOH's name was cleared. The problem this time around is that 2 EOH directors are board members of Keating's companies. The 2 directors are John King, Chief Financial Officer, and Asha Bobat, the man who founded the company about 19 years ago. People are wondering how much they knew. Keating was recently in Parliament in Cape Town. Here, he was accused of wrongfully receiving tenders worth millions of rands from the South African Police Services and the State Information Technology Agency. Some of the contracts date back as far as 2010. He is also accused of facilitating kickbacks and bribes to compromised former Acting Police Commissioner Khomotso Phahlane. At the hearing, which took place on the 29th of November, the Standing Committee on Public Accounts instructed the SAPS and SETA to terminate the contracts as they believed they were corrupt. Robert McBride, head of the Independent Police Investigative Directorate that raided Keating's company, said he had not been cooperative with investigating officials. But he was hopeful this would soon change.
We're hoping that Mr. Keating can find it in his conscience to cooperate with us and provide the necessary information or explanations. He hasn't yet. Neither has General Phahlane on the allegations. But we will have the conversation. As to imprisonment, and it's not our decision, it's the decision of the prosecuting authority and due processes of the law. We can finish our investigation to the satisfaction of the NPA and hand it over. We are getting close to that point.
EOH has announced plans to dispose of Mr. Keating's companies. It's not clear how long this will take or whether this will come at a loss to the ICT company, given the pressure on its share price. This makes it even harder for investors to have confidence in EOH. At least Ernest Kaplan, MD of Kaplan Equity, has chosen to stick around.
It's very difficult for me to judge whether EOH is a company that has done anything drastically wrong or has been involved in corruption of the sort, etc. Very difficult for me to say. But I don't think that one should take it lightly at all, because you need to really take it head on. You need to actually, first of all, know what is going on, understand what is the situation, because maybe if you don't know what the situation is, you better find out what the situation is and you better deal with it effectively if you have any chance of repairing your reputation. Because I think these allegations, although there's been no court case and no found guilty, etc., they have really dented the reputation of the company hugely, and I think they cannot be taken lightly at all. The company's got to get to the bottom of it. I believe that with the case of these three companies that are the ones that are being spoken about, that EOH is doing quite an extensive investigation and even hiring outside experts to help with that. So I think they're on the right track to getting there, but it's a long road to recover reputation and to get that confidence back from investors. Some investors will never have that confidence back ever. They walk away and that's it.
Investors have also frowned upon the EOH directors that used debt to buy shares in the company, a move that cost those that hold the stock.
Perceptions are very important, but it's a combination of all of this that the market looks in and says, one, it doesn't really trust what's inside EOH. Two, management's never been particularly transparent about what's there. Three, there is large overhang of ex-vendors ex-vendors of businesses, and there's lots of them, that EOH has bought, now unencumbered, that have come out of warranty periods and the like. So the potential overhang of sellers coming to the market, realizing that effectively what is their retirement by the businesses they've entered into EOH, can create a massive amount of selling pressure in the market. And then just the nail on the, just to put the cherry on the top, effectively, is the number of directors, and it came out on SENS, had effectively geared positions in their own stock.
It's quite sad that those margin calls happened, and I would also have wondered, maybe could the directors not have funded those calls so that those shares wouldn't have to be sold, but maybe they were at their maximum amounts that they could afford. Who knows?
In a recent interview with CNBC Africa, John King said he did not understand why investors were not buying more EOH shares, as the company's prospects were positive in the disruptive age of technology.
But I think important is that companies need technology regardless. That market is growing at 5-6% per annum, both in South Africa and internationally. And what companies are looking for is a company like ourselves that provides fully integrated solutions across the board. And that's where our strength lies, in that we have solutions end to end, from the consulting side right through to implementation, right through to the management of those particular solutions. So our addressable market is over 230 billion in South Africa alone. You can double that figure at least in terms of the emerging markets that we're involved in. So our market share is in South Africa 6%. In terms of our addressable market in South Africa and emerging markets, negligible. So huge legs in terms to grow further.
But EOH CEO Zunaid Mayat came to the rescue of his directors, telling CNBC Africa the purchase of shares using debt was not intended to erode value for shareholders.
Look, I think these were done in the individual capacities of the individual shareholders. I think they were probably done naively and innocently, and it was really individuals taking their own shareholding, putting it up as collateral for a loan, and much of the loan was used to buy more EOH shares.
This suggests risks of further margin calls should the share price of EOH come under renewed pressure. However, news that EOH founder and former CEO Asher Bobat would be returning to the company after his shock exit earlier this year provided some relief for the battered stock.
Asher's got a wonderful background with the country. He's our founder. He's got incredible experience, deep levels of expertise, incredible wisdom that we've always been able to fall back on, and I think we want to leverage that for a period of time to be assisting us.
The market welcomed the announcement that Bobat, who has transformed EOH into Africa's largest ICT company, would once again be a regular on its corridors.
We were under the impression that he would come back as a non-exec director, in a consulting sort of capacity to help the group. And you're quite right, it's now seems to be saying that he's coming back not as a director of the company. I'm not quite sure why that is, but I guess the good thing is that it said he's coming back on a full-time basis, which I think is probably more than I thought he would come back as. So that's probably a positive thing.
Mayet explained why Bobat did not come back as a non-executive director, as was expected.
So I've managed to convince him to postpone joining the board as a non-executive director. I think he would be of far greater value to us, assisting us in the business for a period of time.
It's not clear how long that will be, or whether his return will be enough to ensure a sustainable recovery in EOH.
One of the big issues facing EOH right now is to restore that confidence, especially amongst investors. I think a lot of investors over the past couple of months have seen things, comments in the media, allegations, a whole host of things, and have kind of lost that sense of, I guess, confidence in the company, and the share price has felt that. So I think, will the return of the former CEO be enough to restore that confidence? I'm not sure, but I think it will certainly help, because I suspect that he will have a huge role to play going forward. But it is a big challenge for the company.
Time for a short break. In the second half, we scrutinize the way EOH pays for its acquisitions and ask if it's sustainable given the current weakness of its share price. Stay with us. Welcome back. Since listing on the JSE in 1998, EOH has shown phenomenal growth. But much of this growth has been fueled by rampant acquisitions, which have been funded using shares. In this half, we assess what EOH will do now that its funding model is under pressure from a weakened share price. We also examine whether the company can survive.
The growth EOH has achieved for almost 2 decades is nothing to be sneezed at. It's diversified into a number of sectors, providing clients with ICT solutions in key areas of the economy such as telecommunications, retail, mining, financial services, and government. It's increased its staff count to over 12,000 people across Africa and the Middle East over that period.
EOH has had an impeccable track record for more than 12 years, 15 years odd. Growth, good organic growth, and acquiring businesses in the right areas to strengthen their overall offering. So today they have arguably the widest end-to-end offering, in the ICT space in the whole of Africa. They've got a very strong offering. I think what you're touching on with this acquisition model is very important, because EOH over many years grew at 30 to 40% every single year, and those acquisitions helped enable that. I think what's happened now is the company is big for the space. I'm not saying there isn't growth left, but it's not as easy to grow when you're a 15 billion rand revenue company compared to when you're a 1 billion rand revenue company.
EOH's annual report shows that since 2014, the number of shares issued to vendors increased substantially. That increase was mainly related to acquisitions.
As EOH has come off a very long, more than a decade, possibly even a decade and a half of being highly acquisitive, building itself as a platform IT service company, with acquisitions running possibly even in the hundreds of businesses it's bought. A large portion of these acquisitions were done via issuing of shares. That creates the potential of a huge overhang by ex-vendors in the market. And combine that with the fact that lots of acquisitions bring lots of risk, because not every acquisition works out perfectly. And in the background you have, because SETA in the South African context, the tech sector dominates tech spend. It's about a quarter to a fifth of South African tech spend, and SETA effectively procures for the public sector. It brings with it that EOH would naturally have a large exposure to the public sector, and it does. My understanding is they have about a quarter to a fifth of their business in the public sector, so it's a good proxy for South African services spend on the tech side. Now, the public sector is obviously at risk at this point. There's been a lot of state capture. There's a lot of risk around procurement cycles. There's a lot of risk about people involved in it, and whether or not EOH is guilty, I'll leave that up to other people to decide. But it is definitely, one, a large supplier in the sector, two, heavily exposed to the sector, and three, there appear to be related people within its business and that sector, and not all of them look particularly clean at this point.
The bulk of those acquisitions came under Bobat's watch, although the EOH founder sees them differently.
I think it is important that acquisition and joiner just puts the emphasis on different things, and we believe on the more important thing is when we call it joiner. Nobody is allowed in EOH to call it acquisitions. We go, and the reason is that you acquire a truck, you acquire a phone, a cup, whatever is around you. You do not acquire what is in essence in our game, people. Groups of people, and those groups of people can't buy people. Yes, there is a transaction. So in the corporate finance world, there is somebody who buys something, gets something, there is a swap of different types of assets. But that's got no meaning in real life, and you like your jacket, but you probably don't remember what you paid for it. But you will remember that you like it. The same thing here. The people that join us because we like them, and they like us, hopefully, because they see future for themselves, because they identify with our value system, our culture. We didn't buy them. We didn't acquire them. We didn't pay for their soul, their mind, their spirits, their experience, their network, etc. It comes with them. And typically we don't buy businesses for sale, because if something is for sale, then the people behind it wants to sell their asset. We don't want people who are for sale. We typically would approach people, and we almost kind of enjoy it and encourages us when they say no to us, because then we know if they would join us, then they will do it wholeheartedly.
Do you pursue further if somebody says no? Does it ever become hostile?
It's a process. I think doing the joiners story is a process. Often we talk to people for years before they choose to join us. It's a people thing. Even when they joined us and there is a transaction, it takes 2-3 years for people to just settle and say, yeah, I am here, I have changed, I identify 100% with what's happening here. It's not an instant, it's not a transaction.
For Kaplan, however, EOH's rampant acquisitions are not too much of a concern because they have been buying the right companies.
I think the debt's not a big issue at EOH. I think for me what's more of an issue, if one looks at the numbers, is obviously the slowdown in organic growth, which I mentioned previously in the last results. And we look very carefully at the next results coming up and for the year to July 18 to see how that develops. But for me, a big concern is the working capital in the business. So an IT company may not have fixed assets on the balance sheet, but they've certainly got working capital. These are amounts that their customers owe them, amounts that they pay to their suppliers, and some inventories. In the case of EOH, over the past 2 years, their working capital has deteriorated significantly.
It's safe to say EOH's share price keeps management up at night, and they are taking concrete steps to restore it.
The share price has been under pressure for some time, and it is a function of what's happening in the broader marketplace. I think general investor confidence is pretty tepid at the moment. We've had, I think, across the board a large sell-off of South African stocks by international investors, and we've had a fair amount of international shareholders. I think also we've had some adverse media earlier this year around from Amabungani in particular. We went through a fairly rigorous process with them, opened up all our information to them. And I think corrected that situation. As a result of that, the share price started coming back, and then recently some more adverse media, and obviously we've taken steps to deal with that.
You've taken steps that I know you can't disclose right now for various legal matters, but should your investors who don't know what is going on be worried now? Because what they're doing, they're reading information in the media about certain individuals connected to EOH. That's all they're going on.
Of course. No, we've taken quite concrete steps to deal with the situation. As we've indicated in our announcement on Monday, where we've engaged ENS to do a fairly in-depth fact-finding review for us, and following that we'll take whatever measures are necessary, and if it means we need to be cooperating with the authorities, then we'll do that.
Mm-hmm. Whatever measures are necessary.
Absolutely.
Meaning even if it means accountability.
Of course.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, over and above that, we talked about confidence. We've been through a process following the Amabungani situation. We've been through a fairly lengthy program of reviewing our overall governance framework within the business. We're in the process of reviewing all our public sector contracts across the group to ensure that they're all above board and were appropriately subjected to our governance and risk management processes. We've changed the way so maybe let's take a step back. I think there's certainly, whether it's perceived or real, heightened levels of risk associated with doing business in the public sector. As a result of that, we've taken some very deliberate steps to change the way we engage in the public sector, from the perspective that we've brought in independent oversight into the process of engaging in the public sector. We've asked ENS to play some of that role from an independent oversight perspective. And also what we've also done then is, we use lots of third-party suppliers, technology providers, global, international, as well as local partners and subcontractors. What we've done there is we've gone through a process of centralizing the whole repository and the information around all these third-party partners, and gone through a fairly rigorous vetting process of ensuring that all of these third parties are appropriate third parties to be dealing with.
But he does agree that the model of using shares to pay for acquisitions will have to be reviewed.
Given where the share price is, we certainly need to be taking stock and reassessing the model and how we move forward with acquisitions. I think what we'll be doing with our whole acquisition pipeline is reviewing the pipeline, looking at what the potential deal structures could look like, and maybe reconsidering the way we structure some of the deals, if at all.
Goodwill is the single largest line item of EOH's assets. But unlike the case of Steinhoff, where too much goodwill on its balance sheet raised red flags, Kaplan agrees that the case for ICT companies is different.
Goodwill is a financial term that one gives to the amount over and above the asset value that you pay for in a company. Now, in IT companies, in most of them, there are no real fixed assets that you put on the balance sheet. There's no buildings or plant and machinery or big equipment, etc. It's typically a lot of people who have skill with a lot of laptops and a few servers and good ideas. And it's their relationships with their customers and the ability for those businesses to earn future income, which is what the asset is. But it's not really an asset that you would find typically on a balance sheet. So the excess that they pay for these companies over and above what these companies have on their balance sheets when they do the acquisition is divvied up into various portions of intangible assets, some of which is goodwill.
It's hard not to draw comparisons between EOH and Steinhoff. But while Steinhoff's future hangs in the balance, there's more hope for EOH. And if returned founder Asha Bobat has anything to do with it, EOH will be around for many years to come.
The path of EOH, the philosophy, the principles, etc., were the same almost to those that before EOH started. There is a one-page that was written called Work-Life Constitution, which sets the principles of the business. And there is no difference. I see the path continuing to be there. I think we want to remain relevant to the society we serve. Everything we do is aimed to having a better world, and hence why we involve with technology for water, the energy, with elements that affects our lives, and that's where we want to be. The definition of EOH is very wide, and it's really aimed to help our society, our economy grow, and everything we do is towards that. We're going to develop and grow for many, many, many years to come, and I see the relevancy of EOH not being diluted.
And that's where we leave it for this EOH special. Whether the future of EOH is as bleak as that of Steinhoff will be revealed in the next few weeks when IPID makes its findings on Keith Keating and the companies that fall under the umbrella of EOH. From myself, Fifi Peters, thanks so much for watching. It's bye for now.